10 seconds. 5 seconds.
In your face, all over the place. We're online 24/7. 24/7. You're listening to the hottest internet station.
From beautiful Saline in southeastern Michigan.
Around the world at sunsky.mysteries.com.
This is the 2009 Top 10 Webcam in the World winner. This is SET.
Well, good evening, everybody. Bill Xam here, your host for Surrounded by Idiots. Tonight is Tuesday, and Tuesday, of course, is our interview night. You know, over the years, I have had the opportunity and the good fortune to meet a lot of famous people and to be able to interview a lot of famous people, from astronauts to vice presidents to famous political leaders as well as scientists. And tonight we happen to have a very special guest who's going to tell us a lot of information. In the world of the internet, there is a category of discussion called conspiracy theories. All types of theories and other concepts are presented, from commercial websites like Godlike Productions or Above Top Secret to genre-specific websites that cover specific topics. There are as many topics to choose from as there are secret fears of disaster and prophecies and doom. One of the most prevalent types of discussion, videos, and articles, presentations today, and for around the past 10 years, is the topic of celestial-based disasters. The most popular of these is the discussion regarding what is called Planet X, Nibiru, the Destroyer, or Wormwood. Every once in a while, a newcomer comet or asteroid pops up that causes a stir, but once it comes and goes without the expected or possibly longed-for disaster, attention once again turns to our seemingly genetically based fear. There are many sources of so-called information about this as there are grains of sand on a beach. However, what if you could find a science-based source of information? What if you could hear from an actual researcher, an actual science-based discussion about this topic? Joining us tonight is a gentleman whom I consider to be the best of the best in this subject, and you've probably never heard of him. But in the astronomical community, he is well known. We know from assorted science-based papers and research that there is some consideration being given to the distinct possibility that this mysterious stranger, a visitor from the distant past, the purveyor of disaster from Atlantis to the Exodus, to what appears to be a myriad of ancient and highly developed civilizations, is once again on its way to our home world, this marble in space known as Earth. Now I'd like to introduce our guest. His name is Boris, and I hope I don't mess up his last name too badly. It's Boris Artemenko. Boris, good evening. How are you?
Good evening, Bill. Good evening, everybody.
We're very happy to have you here. Boris hails to us from Brazil, and we are talking via the internet. So the connection may become tenuous, but hopefully we should be okay for the entire show. In the normal course of science, there are certain agreed-upon steps that are taken from the presentation of an idea to the experimentation of the idea to what is called the consensus, which brings the idea to birth as a scientific fact. This topic of what we'll call for this discussion Planet X is an odd duck in that the academic view and expectancy of proof versus affirmation of past events. We are facing the unknown, both in experience and academic knowledge. In this, there is a tremendous amount of disinformation, so we need the straight information from someone who does the original research. So, Boris, let me ask you a question. What exactly in a nutshell, is Planet X? Boris, are you there? Are you there, Boris? It appears that we may have lost our guest. I will...
Oh, I'm here, all right, but I'm hearing the whole thing over again.
Oh, that's because you have the volume on the stream up. You have to turn down the volume on the stream on your computer.
Let's see if I can...
Or just close that page in your browser.
Okay, it seems to have gone.
Okay, very good. Now we should be okay.
Good.
So what exactly is Planet X?
No, I still have... You're asking me if I'm here again. I'm here. Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to live television. This is how we do it here on the Celine Entertainment Television
I'm trying
Group.
to find the volume control on the streamer, but...
Oh, if you go down to the bottom, a little control panel pops up. And from there, there's a little speaker down there. You can click on that. One moment, folks, while we take care of this brief technical difficulty. Hopefully Planet X will wait. I don't think it's going to come smashing into the planet at this particular inopportune moment. So we'll just go ahead and wait here see if Boris can turn down the stream on his player there.
Yeah, there's there, but I can't reach it because it's a bit lower.
Or you can just close that tab in your browser too.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you just fine, sir.
I can't seem to get the controls visible. Uh-oh. Okay.
Uh-oh, I don't like that.
Yeah, I don't like it either. I'm trying to turn it down. Okay, I seem to have succeeded.
Okay, good. That'll be good.
Okay, you can still hear me, can't you?
Yes, I can hear you. You can also just stop the stream too down in that little area. There's a pause button that you can hit.
It's all right. Page is coming back on its own.
Okay.
Okay, will you please repeat the question because I really couldn't get it through all the echo.
Okay, what exactly in a nutshell is Planet X? What is this thing?
Well, this is something that I unfortunately cannot answer, as you say, in a nutshell. I have to go back a while in time because this involves a lot of questions that are being discussed seriously in some quarters.
Well,
it has
let's go back as far as you need to.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Go ahead and go back as far as you need to. Take however much time you need.
All right. Planet X is supposed to be a body connected with a red dwarf star, which is also believed to be a binary or twin star to our own sun. This is a subject that is very touchy in academic circles because mostly scientists have noticed that the major planetary systems they have found out in space are always binary. In other words, they have two suns. But they couldn't find a second sun to our own system. But this hypothesis now believes that there is such a binary star, a twin star, which originated together with our planetary system and was expelled on a perpendicular orbit that takes a while traveling in an oval that and this orbit, so every 30
Uh-oh, it looks like we have possibly lost our call. Okay, they're going to try to get the call. Skype is trying to get the call back. As I mentioned earlier,
on its way down and is now being seen on its way up on the return leg of the orbit. This has to do with the idea that our planetary system originated probably with a big bang of an enormous star, and this gave birth to a smaller star, which is our sun, another smaller star, which is this binary dwarf star, now a dwarf star, and both had 5 to 6 planets circling around them, interlacing in their orbits. Now, we originally should have had 5 large planets, Jupiter or larger size. And on one of the trips of the binary star into our system, there was a collision with one of the big planets, and this gave rise to half a dozen smaller bodies. In fact, half a dozen is way beyond, way below the count. It gave origin to a big rock that was caught in orbit around the sun and eventually became our planet Earth. But also other pieces of this original large planet with which there was this collision 4.7 billion years ago also is supposed to have given birth to Mars, Venus, Mercury, and the asteroid belt that we have between Mars and Jupiter, which are remains from this collision. Now, one factor that is interesting, it took the Earth a couple of billion years to terraform, to become a habitable planet with an atmosphere, with the continents as we know them today, with the constitution we know our planet today. But this still means that the binary star returns to our vicinity every 3,600 years. So this is what brings Planet X along with it, because Planet X is supposed to be the biggest planet in this twin system and the one on its outer limits of its own planetary system. So this is what is supposed to be Planet X. And this is one of the things that I want to stress today. We have the tendency to think that Planet X is a rogue thing that comes in from space all on its own. No, it's a whole system. It's part of our existence. It has been with us for, let's say, something like 2 billion years, crossing and recrossing all the time. And it is supposed to have had an inhabited planet, which is Nibiru. So this gives you an idea of what Planet X is supposed to be. I won't say it is that. The name comes from old texts, and in fact is mentioned even in the Bible. It is present in the Colburn Bible. There are many ancient texts which mention the Nibiru as a planet, as an inhabited planet, supposed to be inhabited by a species called the Anunnaki. And apparently this species has been interfering with our evolution to upgrade our species from a primitive condition, from a semi-animal, semi-irrational condition, to the man that we are today, supposedly an intelligent species, capable of enormous technological advances, and so on and so on. So this brings us back into our time. I'll let Bill now ask the next question, because I think that I have managed to condense in a very short account of what Nibiru is supposed to be.
You've done a wonderful job. I think we all have a better understanding of what exactly is going on and what exactly this thing is. Now, we know that this thing comes around every 3,600 years, and apparently it's time for it to come and pay its next visit. What I'm wondering, and I'm sure our audience is too, what past civilizations has this interaction also coincided with?
Well, we have evidence, historic evidence, which is limited to a period we can call our modern historical period, which goes back to something like 12,000 years, really, where we have some written material, some hieroglyphs and other cryptic evidence of previous civilizations, of previous social groups, and they all revert to certain facts coinciding with the presence or visit of a certain destroyer from space, because Nibiru is also known by many other names. Although Nibiru is probably its most correct name as far as humans are concerned, it is also called Destroyer, Blue Kachina, Red Kachina. There is a lot of confusion about the whole thing, but it is present in all the myths of social groups that have been historically researched, and their mythology and legends and religions have been examined. Let's take the Dogon in Mali, who are connected to a Syrian, a planet that is supposed to come from the Sirius star region, which is none other than the very Nibiru. Now, we are accustomed to think of Nibiru as an isolated thing. Let's not forget that this is a system, a planetary system, carrying half a dozen other planets, and is a twin to our system. So it interacts with us every 3,600 years. Now, what happens? When it comes into our planetary system, it comes on the outskirts of our planetary system. It may have been the cause of another collision beyond Saturn, which upset the axis of Uranus, which revolves around the sun sideways. On the other hand, when it begins its return leg, it crosses our planetary system much closer to the sun. This accounts for the fact that a collision happened in the past, and there is a risk of a collision in the present, let's put it this way. But every time, it doesn't happen every time. You can imagine that if we count in the last 1,400,000 years, how many times this has occurred every 3,600 years. And if there was a collision every time, well, we wouldn't exist. So it doesn't happen every time. But catastrophes do happen because every time it comes past, it goes past one of our planets, it dislodges our magnetic shields, it affects our surface, and obviously, since there is magnetic interaction between the two bodies, and Nibiru is supposed to be an enormous one, somewhere between 4 or 5 times the size of Earth, So any magnetic interaction between Nibiru and Earth, or any of the other planets, if you want to put it that way, will affect that planet. The closer it goes by, the more it will affect it. Now, there are certain historical facts every 3,600 years approximately that happen on Earth, which can be attributed to such a provoked capacity through the crossover. The deluge, the universal deluge, which was not so universal after all, but it happened and affected what was known as the civilized universe of the time, happened 11,800 years ago. 10,800 years ago, which means 3 crossovers ago. In between, we had a tremendous volcanic explosion. In fact, it was a series of volcanoes exploding, and the most famous one is Krakatoa, which has not been located in one place only, but has been located in several. Some people attribute the Krakatoa explosion to have happened in the Mediterranean, opening up the Santorini Islands, but others also know that there is a Krakatoa now sunk beneath the ocean in the Indian Ocean, and which is again threatening to erupt. So very serious and intense, supposedly natural catastrophes occur as a chain reaction to the interaction of magnetic forces from the passage of Nibiru to whichever planet it passes by closest. It pushes asteroids out of its way because it obviously, with its mass and its magnetic shield, it has to push anything that is smaller than it away from it, opening up its path. Otherwise, it would simply destroy everything that came across its path. But a larger body, let's say Mars size or Earth size, the risk of collision exists. However, there is a certain synchronicity in the interlacing of the two systems every 3,600 years. We have to remember that our planetary system is moving around the galactic center. The planetary system that brings Nibiru is moving almost obliquely to our plane. And when it crosses our plane, it passes in between the planets, passes below them, makes the curve, and again passes between the other planets closer to the sun on its way out. Now, since both movements are simultaneous, and it is our twin binary star, it also is pulled in the same direction around the galactic center. If it were an independent planetary system, the risk of collision would be greater because it would be autonomous to the forces that keep our planetary system on its path. So this is another factor that has a certain scientific bearing, which means that the binary system we are talking about is part of our system because they are moved around the galactic center by the same forces. So they move simultaneously. Thus, the risks of continuous collisions are diminished to be non-significant. But the effects are not necessarily insignificant, as we can see from current events on our planet. Okay, have I answered the second question?
I believe that you have. On the screen right now for the viewers, I have a chart that's up there that shows us the current increase in global earthquakes, and it is going up exponentially, it appears, since 1973. We've got 1973, we had 5,000 earthquakes. And in 2003, we had over 30,000 earthquakes. Does this tie into the approach of this system? And how far away does this thing have to be before it really starts affecting our earthquakes and volcanoes and everything? How close does it have to be?
Well, let's try and explain this by using our own planetary system as a model. All our planets, all our known planets, basically, have orbits that succeed each other at different distances which are proportional to their sizes. Is that understandable?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, what keeps each planet in its own orbit without invading the other planet's orbit? A very simple thing. Each planet has a magnetic field of its own. Let's think of our atmosphere. There's a limit to our atmosphere, but beyond our atmosphere, there is still another grid, shield, let's put it this way, that is magnetic. And when this magnetic shield touches the magnetic shield of the next planet, they repel each other. So they keep each other in their orbits. Okay?
Okay.
They keep the same steady distances one from the next because of their magnetic interaction. Now, for a planet 4.5 times the size of Earth, and some say that it's 4.5 times the size of Jupiter, which would be even worse. Imagine what would be the distance covered between the planet's surface and the limits of its magnetic shield. So it doesn't have to be really just right beside me to touch me. The effects of its magnetic shield would affect me at a very great distance. On the other hand, there is another effect, the domino effect, that when it crossed on its downward leg, it affected the planets at the limit of our planetary system, which in turn reflected this interaction to the next planet going inside. Okay, does that follow?
Yeah, yes it does.
I'm not using scientific language for a very simple reason. If we start in academic terms here, we will never understand anything. We will only complicate matters. We will start
here
with
going,
formulas and equations and whatnot, and we will get nowhere. On a human level, we can also think of this as something different. For those of you who know that the human body is surrounded by a magnetic aura, when you approach somebody you never saw before, probably you will be affected in some way for instant liking or disliking of this new person before you ever get close to this person. Because the magnetic auras of each person also affect the next one. And when somebody bumps into you, you will obviously be impelled to bump into the next person closest to you. So this is where the effect that Nibiru has, even from a great distance. Now, this question of distances in space is something that I always debate, discuss intensely with the people I usually talk about these things. Time and distance are criteria based on human perspectives starting from our Earth. And we think that the same criteria is applicable in space. For example, it is said that the light from the sun, the rays from the sun, take 6 minutes to reach us. Consider the distance that is the sun is supposed to be, and it takes only 6 minutes for the sun's rays to arrive here. So what will we be able to evaluate as the distances between the planets, and what distance would be needed for Nibiru to affect us? Okay? Mm-hmm. Did I make any things difficult, or are they clear enough in that sense?
For me, they're clear. We had our first question come in from the chat room, and that would be, did this Nibiru create the Great Flood? And I believe we answered that in the during the first segment of the show. But I'm wondering, maybe we could go into that just a little bit more right now. How would the Great Deluge, how would that have been created by an interaction with this planet? I mean, did it suck all of the oceans up out of the bottoms of the ocean, out of the Great Basins, or what exactly do you think happened? Was it some type of tidal waves?
I think, and I'm responsible for what I'm going to say, I think that first we have to remember that the levels of the seas and oceans were much lower than in the past than they are today. And by past, I would speak of 12,000, 14,000 years ago. Ocean levels were 500 meters lower than we have them today. The amount of water that has increased on the planet is enormous. If at that time, when there was much less water, any minor quake that would affect the nucleus of the Earth and move it by 2 or 3 degrees from its magnetic pole axle, it would obviously slosh the water around. Take a bathtub, fill it half with water, and then shake it. Shake it sideways. First to left, then to right. What happens? The water sloshes and changes the level it attains. The water doesn't really change the level. The fact is that what changes is what is below the water. So it's the Earth that sinks for an instance in the side where the water rises, and comes out where the water is more shallow, and when the movement is in the opposite direction, the same thing happens. Now, if we take the Mesopotamian area where the deluge was mainly perceived, what we have there is a very low level of Earth. It's a depression. Okay?
Okay.
So in this depression, if the water started sloshing, obviously they would invade the whole area of Mesopotamia, and that would be a universal flood for everybody there, because the population was then concentrated in that area, the so-called civilized population of the Earth. So there you have the deluge. Now, did Nibiru provoke it? I would say yes. I would say yes for a very simple reason. I stated a few minutes ago that every time Nibiru passes close to any planet, it immediately affects the balance of that planet. It can upset the magnetic axle, it can upset the seas, because then it will upset the tides, it will provoke the crust movements, the tectonic movements of the planet, and there you have it. Every time you have an earthquake or a volcano eruption undersea, what happens? Immediately there isn't a large tsunami as we had in the last years in the East and in Japan, but there is always an increase in the level of the seas and of the violence of the waves, which affects the coastal areas. In a major situation, that would provoke a flood. What we associate as a deluge is in fact nothing more than an enormous tsunami in a vast region. Imagine if such a thing happened in North Europe, where Denmark and Holland, the lowlands are. They would immediately be submerged by the water. Okay?
Okay.
That's about it. It's not very hard to understand that. To say again that Nibiru provoked it, most probably yes. I didn't see it, I didn't witness it. There is no historical evidence of Nibiru's passage at that time, but the probabilities from all the legends and all the sources that we have been researching for the last 20-odd years on this subject show us that yes, most probably this was caused by the crossover of Nibiru at that time. This and many other facts that have happened on our planet. Every 3,600 years, something intensely catastrophic happens. Okay?
Okay. That's
all right.
That's a. I believe that's a good answer to the question. I have a question, and it's a two-part question, and I think they might be related. When this other planet, this planet X or this system, comes close to us and it disrupts our magnetic shield, obviously not everybody is going to die, or there wouldn't be anybody here to listen to us. So what happens to the human population, and more importantly, our technology? Are we going to be thrown back into the Stone Age? And the second part of this question is, do you think that we're going to see a so-called pole shift? And if so, how much of a shift, and how fast do you think this would happen?
Okay. Let's take the first part.
Okay.
The question of human survival in a catastrophe scenario that affects the whole planet. This is something that has been enhanced as a topic by all the prophecies connected with the Mayan calendar, other prophecies. We could list 40 or 50 recent and ancient prophecies saying that the world would come to an end through a major planetary catastrophe. So all this has been lumped into one situation right now and is concerning everybody. If Nibiru passes by our planet very close, it will probably affect us seriously. And probably we will find ourselves in a quandary of depopulation. Many people will die. Forecasts, alarming forecasts, speak of something like 95% of humanity. I wouldn't go that far. This is not the end of times. This is something we have to take with a grain of salt. We humans are afraid of death. We humans are afraid because we don't know what awaits us beyond the limits of our vision. So we are always afraid of anything new, of any new crisis, and how we will cope with it. This fear is being used to intensify some other things that have nothing to do with Nibiru, but are being blamed on Nibiru, which are of our own human design. We are self-destructive in this way. We try to dominate other peoples through fear and all that sort of thing. But certainly there will be deaths. if the disaster is planet-wide, there will be deaths, and many deaths, millions of deaths. Millions, in the first instance and in the aftermath. Because once our coastal cities are flooded, our major utilities destroyed by tsunamis happening all over, we will be bereft of means of surviving in the modern technological way we have become accommodated to. We have become too used to this comfort that there is a large generating station that provides us with all the electricity we need. We have destroyed all the small energy mills that used hydraulic energy to supply us with light and etc. Now everything is concentrated in corporate hands and mostly placed on the most vulnerable places, because look, 60% of the world's population nowadays lives on the coast. In the big cities that have spread all over, on the East Coast, on the West Coast of the Americas, of Europe, okay? They will be the first ones to be hit. It's interesting to note, for example, that in New York, on the streets, if you watch where you're walking, you will find posts with signs, in case of flood, follow this way. Now, why would such a thing exist in New York, in Manhattan? Because floods do happen, and they are known to happen for various reasons. Now, a major flooding, this time, wouldn't help. You have seen plenty of pictures in the movies showing catastrophic scenery of giant waves smashing cities in their way. You have witnessed on video, on TV, the news items on the Japanese tsunami. You saw the water invade, and it wasn't so high. It didn't. The waves were not higher than 10 meters, 30 feet. So imagine if a giant wave, let's say 60 feet tall, twice that size, rushes into a city on the coast, which is at sea level. What happens? It will wash everything in its way, and then when it comes back, because it will flow back into the sea, it will flow back into its origin, it will take with it whatever it will carry back with it anything that it picks up on the way again. Then, what happens? All the services, the utilities break down. Medical institutions break down. So we now have a scenario not of a Stone Age, but of a complete primitive situation where sickness will breed, epidemics will rise, there will be no chance of having help from anywhere to bury the bodies. If anybody has read the history of the bubonic plague in Europe, you know that bodies were left all over the streets, and some people picked them up in carts and burnt them at various intervals because there were so many. This will be a possible scenario. So, what would I do in such a situation? This is the major subject today, survival. This would, for the time being, answer your first question, I think.
Yes.
The second part, we will not be taken back to a Stone Age scenario, because I don't believe there was ever a Stone Age scenario in our history. This is another anathema that has to be clarified. Humanity, once it arose as an intelligent species, once it reached an intelligent stage of interaction, it became civilized. But what are the criteria to say that a society is civilized? We are used to our automobiles, our airplanes, our skyrockets, and whatnot. People were used to tilling the ground and growing their own food. Were they uncivilized? No. So civilization is a myth in itself. It's the capacity to survive in critical situations of mankind that gives us the hope that this will not be the end of times, but the beginning of new times. Most people nowadays are complaining that governments are exploiting them, that they are intending a new order to exploit them, new isms are rising to dominate people. We are still at war with each other. We have no peace, so everything is wrong, and we should have a better world. We can make a better world, and I think that we will have to make a better world, those of us who do survive. I don't know if I will survive. I hope so. I think I will, because I'm taking measures. What measures? I am getting out of the vulnerable areas. I believe that we are facing a critical situation that may happen next year. And if we are not ready, we will definitely not survive. We will be caught in a situation where we will not be able to run away from disaster. But those of us who do survive will be in a condition to start a whole new civilization on better terms, if they remember all the complaints they had in the present one. Does that answer your second question?
Yes, it does, and it actually answers another question that I was going to have, which would have been, are there any good things that can come from this? And I believe you just answered that. What about the part about the pole shift? What? Let's see. Well, let me rephrase that. What direction is this thing coming from? And I have been led to believe that it's coming from the south. Is that true? And
yes, that seems to be true. I'm answering that too.
Okay.
So that you can go on to the next stage.
Okay. And how does this affect things like the pole shift and any deluge that we're going to see? How big and what kind of a deluge, a so-called deluge, which was probably a giant tsunami? What type of effects are we going to see in that area, do you think?
Well, I think that the outgoing leg, the returning leg of this system, is coming from the south.
Okay.
Okay. Now, what is the south for us? We think in terms of Earth naturally. Mm-hmm. That's obvious. So, what is the south of our planet? Let's forget the pole, the magnetic pole for the time being, and think of the sort of physical, the hypothetical physical pole around which our planet revolves. Okay?
Yep.
The center. It is already oblique to the plane by 6 degrees. We are not straight up in our orbit around the sun. Now, the magnetic shield, it surrounds us and is therefore less oblique at this time than our physical axle. What happens is this. If a large magnetic push comes from the south, it tends to push the south up. It tends to bring the south up and make the Earth go a lot more sideways than it is now. This is why I mentioned earlier that Uranus probably suffered a collision that made it revolve sideways. It was unable to return to a sort of an erect position, if we can say it that way. in the planetary plane. That doesn't mean that the Earth will shift all the way 45 degrees. No. But if it shifts as much as 6 to 12 degrees of its current pole axle, this will definitely be enough to provoke the major catastrophes that we are fearing. Why? Because it will unbalance all the sea frontiers, all the liquid frontiers. The sea is liquid. It will keep its own level irrespective of how the planet is turning. But if the planet turns sideways, then obviously the waters will stay where they are, and they will cover all the ground that is currently at or under their level, or to the level of the waves that will be provoked with this movement. So we should have a minimum 30 to 60 feet wave occurrence on all coasts. For example, we have a city here in South America, a very nice city, by the way, João Pessoa. It's exactly at sea level. Its highest hill is 25 meters above sea level. So a 60-foot wave will immediately flood all of it. Why? Because as it reaches higher ground, it rises with the ground. And it goes on. It will only stop if it finds a height that will block its progress. But as long as it's going uphill, a slope rising, it will rise with the slope. So a 60-foot wave on the coast will still be a 30-foot wave on a 25-meter slope above sea level. So the whole city will go away. It will be washed out, washed in and out again. Now, I mentioned João Pessoa because it is the first vulnerable place in case an accident happens on the Canary Islands. If part of the major Canary Island, where the volcano is located, slides into the sea, it will, independently of Nibiru, immediately reverberate waves that will reach the southern continent of Europe, the western coast of Africa closest to it, and will cross the ocean to reach the east coast of South America and then the east coast of North America in less than 10 hours. João Pessoa will be one of the first cities to be washed away. And the waves that such a catastrophe on the Canary Islands would cause would be much higher than 60 feet, even after crossing a whole ocean. So there you have an example of something that makes coastal cities vulnerable even in the face of natural catastrophes without any extra external influences. But imagine if this is further enhanced by an enormous magnetic force that simply overturns our planet by up to 10 degrees, what will happen? All those places which are already subject to rifts, you have this in the States, for example. I sent you a map, a projected map of what can happen to North America. It can be divided because the Yellowstone supervolcano and the Mississippi Valley can be completely flooded and erupting, and they can divide the continent into three. And this brings to mind, where are we safe, in case anybody thinks of asking that, but this will come later. Okay, so that's it. What will happen if Nibiru passes at a distance where its magnetic shield will affect our magnetic shield strongly, to the point of shifting our magnetic pole by 10 degrees. General catastrophe. That's about it. Go ahead.
A quick follow-up of that, now that you mention that. We do have a question that has come in from the chat room, but let me ask you this question first. We see our magnetic pole drifting at a faster rate of speed right now. Do you think that this Planet X deal, do you think that this is the cause of the magnetic pole drifting? Or is there, do you think there's another cause?
Yes, I do.
You do think so?
I and a few friends of mine, located in various parts of the world, have been trying to follow the magnetic movements with fixed compasses on and observing what happens with time under certain circumstances. And this shift, so far, this wobbling, which is said to be a natural effect and is not such a natural effect at this degree, is beginning to be something worrying, because this shifting of the compass, coming back and forth, has exceeded 2 degrees. Natural wobbling of the planet during its spin in orbit could be considered up to 2 degrees, but once it goes beyond 2 degrees, then something else is pushing. Some other energy is acting to affect it. The only energy that could affect it at this stage in the last 3 years, mind you, the last 3 years, is the dwarf star with the half a dozen planets with Nibiru at its edge. I think that is Nibiru's first symptoms of its crossover on its outer leg. Okay?
Now I have something that you probably have not heard of, but it was a really, really big deal on a couple of websites that I'm a member of. In fact, I started a Google map to track this particular effect, and it was happening all over the world, and I experienced it myself. People were beginning to notice that their compasses were drifting off of the magnetic North Pole. They were drifting as much as 20 degrees, I believe, usually to the west of the North Pole, and then drifting back again. I experienced that myself. I was sitting there watching the compass, and the thing is slowly drifting back and forth and back and forth. And it appears to be happening all over the world. I don't know if it's still happening, because I haven't been really keeping track of it. But do you think that this is also another symptom of this magnetic system coming towards us?
No, I think there is a different explanation for that degree of shifting in the compasses.
What do you think it is?
In our researches, we have had to analyze this point because we noticed this thing happening, and
That's big news, because a lot of people were debunking it. They were saying that's impossible. It's not going to happen. You don't know how to read a compass. And now to hear somebody that's actually in science say that,
it's science. It's clear science, and we are the cause of that, not Nibiru. It's very easy. You have overhead large voltage transmission lines somewhere close to you, don't you?
No, we don't, as a matter of fact, not close to us.
Well, anybody who does, all he has to do is go under those lines with a compass in hand and see what happens.
Yep.
Today, we have so many electromagnetic disturbances in our homes. We are disrupting our individual physical magnetic synchronicities. Cellular phones, TVs, computers, computerized automobiles, all these cameras, video cameras on the streets, all the electronic security material that we are using in the big cities to imprison ourselves worse than the guys who are condemned to Sing Sing or something, or Alcatraz. We are prisoners of electronics today. And all this messes up the magnetic poles on our Earth. We must remember that we are all the fruit of energy. We are energy manifested in physical forms. Mm-hmm. And each form is made up of cells which are differentiated into specific functions and components. In the body, in the human body, for example, we have several magnetic fields. Our heart and our brain work at the highest frequency of all the body. It reaches as high as 40 hertz. Other organs, including the bones, for example, they need a much lower frequency of 2 to 5 hertz to continue existing and to continue to maintain their form and function. Now imagine every time you are close to a TV which functions at a completely different magnetic frequency, issues magnetic rays at you. The computers, I for example have 2 switched on right now looking at me. And they're bright and shiny and emitting magnetic rays, but their frequencies are different, and I am absorbing all that into my body.
Right.
But imagine that on a city scale where you have enormous generating stations, transmitting stations, radio stations, whatever, you name it. Everything today and everything that functions on electronical or energetical basis has a magnetic field of its own. We could have destroyed ourselves a long time ago, but we are fortunate in that we don't yet understand the extent and the reasons why so many electromagnetic forces can function simultaneously and in synchrony to avoid disruption. So these compass shifting by 20 degrees are most probably, I would say 99%, caused by the excess of electromagnetic activity of our technology on the planet, which is not to be happy about, because it's damaging us, it's sickening us. It's disrupting a normal organism already developed to function at a certain as a certain system, as a certain whole system, integral system, and we are disrupting that. This is why so many people have cancers. Those transmission lines, they produce cancers because invasion of strong magnetic forces disrupting our bodily magnetic fields causes the disease of cells. It destroys cells. And when destruction is unnatural, it produces cancers. Cancers are diseased cells destroyed unnaturally. So let's not say that everything is can be blamed on Nibiru, although Nibiru will take the blame for the worst part of it. But we are doing a lot of it to ourselves. We are self-destructive in our unbridled exploitation of energies that we don't understand. We don't really understand what electricity is. We are lucky that we can still harness it through wires and motors and machines, but we don't really understand what it is and the effects of it. But anybody taking a 400-volt shock will tell you electricity is strong.
Yes, it is. I can attest to that. Not that I would ever admit to doing something like that. And a 2,000 volts will kill you because it will burn you. Yes. In old televisions, and the younger viewers won't remember this, but there used to be a device inside of televisions that was called a flyback transformer, and it would increase voltage quite a bit.
6,000 volts.
Yes, and when I was heavily into electronics and doing technical work on televisions and things like that, I was poked more than once by one of these flyback transformers. So I can tell you firsthand that electricity is in fact very, very strong.
Very.
Now
and
we have
we don't
a question.
know how strongly it can affect us.
Yeah, it'll knock you across the room.
Yep.
That's for sure. I have experienced it. Now we had another question, and this is going to kind of backtrack a couple of topics ago, but this vein of discussion is absolutely incredible. I've got more questions on this, but one of my good friends, Village Idiot, asked a question in the chat room. Since
I like this guy.
I love Village Idiot. He's one of my best friends. He's a great guy. Since Naribu and this system is projected to come from the south, and we're going to get into a topic that I really want to talk about. Have any amateur astronomers in the southern hemisphere reported seeing it lately? Or is it possibly the second sun that people are seeing? And that, of course, is going to bring us to Mr. Harrington. And I'm going to pop that up on the screen for people to see right now. Dr. Robert Harrington. He was with the United States Naval Observatory.
And you can post a picture of the double suns that Sue took from her.
Yes, I don't have those darn things handy because I didn't think that we were going to go into this vein. But when we do the replay of the show on the website, those photographs will be up on there. So I know that Harrington was supposed to have sent some telescopes to the southern hemisphere to see if he could find this thing before his untimely demise. So are there any amateurs now seeing this from the southern hemisphere? And is this second sun that people are seeing, and I've seen it myself, is this second sun something to do with that?
I think the second sun has everything to do with that. I've answered the second part of the question first,
okay,
because that's easy to answer.
Right.
The first part of the question, yes, there are not only amateur astronomers in the southern hemisphere. There are whole observatories dedicated to it. In fact, in Australia, a major product is named for it. You know that Nibiru in the Bible is named Absinthus.
Yes.
And there is a major project in Australia that deals with exactly Absinthus and Nibiru, both.
Okay.
It was simply clamped. It was bought out. It is now under control of the establishment, which in turn is controlled from the United States, and it's gaggled. It cannot publish any of its findings, and from the early information that we were able to get from this observatory, they had plenty. They had a lot of it. Harrington was not alone in discovering the arrival of these visitors. Simultaneously with him, several people, professionals, academics, scientists, discovered that something was abnormal in space, that something strange had arrived and apparently was here to stay in terms of a human generation, let's say.
Is that what they call the the magnetic fluff region that we're going through?
Yeah.
Okay. Folks, I have a what's called a whistleblower document from NASA. Somebody snuck it out of NASA, And I'll post that on the website once we get the recording of this show up there. But it discusses this magnetic fluff in extreme detail from NASA's point of view.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You see, NASA is one interesting proposition. They know the truth. They know a hell of a lot more than they will tell us, obviously. I still haven't been able to decide what their reasons to gag all this up are, but the fact is that they have been slowly, gradually releasing pieces of information that once you know how to put the puzzle together, it shows clearly that they are very well aware, they're following up on it, and they're somehow preparing for it.
In what way?
They're preparing to evacuate the major institutions, selected groups of people, obviously connected with the government, with the scientific establishment, and so on. They are also stashing away equipment to be used. There are reports, very serious reports, of underground installations, even as close as Washington, which I think is the worst place of all to have one. But there are supposed to be several underground installations of major proportions, unbelievable size and complexity, with full generation of energy to feed it and to make it work and all that sort of thing. I mean, I'm at a loss because this was off the topic, but anyway. NASA is slowly releasing data because it's finding itself now more than ever in a quandary. It has denied Nibiru so much. It has denied the dwarf star. It has denied the whole episode. It has, coupled with all the debunking, all the disinformation. But now facts are beginning to stare in the face. Facts that you cannot explain in any other way other than accepting the fact that there is an invading planetary system which is crossing our planetary plane and which will produce serious results. Serious, let's put it this way, catastrophes.
Yeah. One of the largest, probably everybody that's listening to this show here in the United States is probably familiar with the supposed underground base in Denver, Colorado.
That's another place.
Yep, it's supposed to be the largest one. It's supposed to be where the quote-unquote, after the big catastrophe, the new seat of power for the United States is going to be the new capital, yada, 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 that sort of thing. You can read whatever you want into that. But getting back to something a little bit more scientific, these magnetic disruptions that we're seeing, the ones that we're causing ourselves and also the ones that are coming from this incoming system, it occurs to me that every time this thing comes by and the magnetics sweep across the Earth and interact with the Earth's magnetic structure, that this may cause effects on human nature and the way humans interact with each other, the auras that you were talking about earlier. People can think of that as your love at first sight or hate at first sight. That's probably an instinctive response. But this magnetic stuff, do you think that this may be the reason why we're seeing all of this social unrest right now? I mean, obviously it's all has a political and a religious start to it, but the way it's affecting people all over the world, the way people are just basically going insane right now, do you think that this magnetic interaction is actually causing all of this social strife? Is that even possible?
Yes, I think it's highly possible. But there is too much. There's a very thin line. It's caused by us, and the thin line is knowing how much of it is being caused intentionally and how much is not.
Okay.
Now, for example, you can't say that in Afghanistan, the unrest, or in the Middle East, the unrest is caused as intensely by such factors as our terrestrial technology and all that thing, because it's far less used, and the poor have very little access to most of this stuff. So it could be explained in New York, but it can't be explained in Kabul.
Yes.
So then you have to bring in the political and other factors, the eternal greed of dominating or controlling either resources or whatever. Okay? This would lead us into this would make us fan out into about 20 different topics. But the fact is this: we have another factor that we have to consider. There is an overpopulation on the planet right now. In what sense? Can the planet bear another 3 billion people? Yes, it can. But if we go on concentrating this population into megalopolis, into highly dense social strata, then all we do is disrupt magnetically the social structure. There are people, I don't like to say it this way, but there are people who go through life without realizing that they are alive. And unfortunately, today, the number of people who are zombies, I would call them zombies.
We call them sheeple.
Huh?
We call them sheeple.
Yeah, okay, sheeple. It's a nicer word. But the number of sheeple is increasing. It's not decreasing. They are being somehow neutralized.
How do you think that's happening? How do you think they're doing it?
Well, I think that they are being numbed by excessive electronic mind control. Look, the TV, television has nothing good to teach to anybody. It's all about crime, envy, greed, betrayal, drinking, partying, anything but anything, war, catastrophe, nothing that is really educational.
No.
And the children, 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old children now watching these things, how do you expect them to come up with a reasonable moral and ethical intelligence? Because intelligence is not merely information. It's knowing how to use information. It's knowing the purpose of information and being able to share that information. And this requires a moral and ethical structure. Look at certain professions, even with higher education. They are simply robotized by interests that dominate the field. Look at the medical profession. The medical profession nowadays is dominated by high electronic technology or industrialized medicine. The high electronic technology, every time you had an X-ray to check your lungs, you already took a shot of radiation. What do you think you're taking every time you have a medical checkup now?
A lot more.
A lot more. You go through such machinery that you don't even understand, and nobody explains why or what for. And you go through electronic fields and magnetic fields, and you're probed internally. So this is automatic. There is a social disruption through our own technology. We are disrupting our own magnetic synchronicities on a human level, on an animal level, and in other ways too. This brings us to another way of sickening a civilization. Food. All these genetically modified cereals that we have nowadays, and foods with additives of all sorts. Look at the American population. Somebody told me that 60% have a weight problem, obesity, from the very youth. What are we generating? We are changing the human form. One good thing that can come from Nibiru's visit is that we will have to go back to basics, till our own soil, harvest our own foods, take care of our own livestock. We will exercise more. We won't have these damn contraptions. We will have to learn how to use flags and drums and trees and smoke to communicate with the next clan so many miles away. But we will revert to being human beings. We're not human nowadays.
Yeah. Boris, let me ask you a question. Do you think that this is some type of a cycle that humanity goes through? Because you know we've had...
Yes, I think so.
We know that in the past we've had Atlantis and other high civilizations, and they all meet the same fate that apparently we're going to meet. So, do you think this is some type of a mystical cycle that that's programmed into us?
Well, I would go a little bit further, but I will have to touch on a subject that most will not accept.
Well, it's up to them whether or not they accept it. The reason why we're here talking is to wake people up and get them thinking. So let's get them thinking.
Let's put it this way.
Okay.
I subscribe to the theory. It's not mine. I'm not the one who thought it up. It has been thought up by many people before me, and I'm always standing on somebody else's shoulders.
Do you have a name?
But humanity... What's that?
Do you have a name of who came up with it?
Well, you can quote a number of names, but basically you would have to revert to certain things that are not accepted generally by society, such things as theosophy, anthroposophy. So we would have to talk about Rudolf Steiner. We would have to talk about Helen Blavatsky. Then we would have to go all the way back to Egypt. Talk of the Gnostic school, which is not what we are led to believe, which is the repository of many what we may call secrets of the evolution of the human being. There is a general... the Hindus, for example, they have a whole philosophy based on this hypothesis. It pervades the whole of their religious books, the Bhagavad, the Upanishads, everything. Civilization, humanity, not civilization. Humanity was essentially one more form brought about on planet Earth as a manifestation of a higher consciousness. Let's not confuse this from the start with any anthropomorphic deity. I'm not talking here of God. I'm talking here about the natural consciousness or awareness of being of the primeval cell. Any cell in our body, for example, knows that it is a cell and that it can be called forth to substitute any other cell in any other part of the body.
Okay.
Okay?
Yep, I'm with you.
So, all physical material, including stones and sand and everything, even water, are made up of cells which realize they have a function and realize that they can exert their function by joining with other cells and by dividing, by sharing and dividing the necessary energies to perform those functions. So, sorry, I mixed myself up right now.
Go ahead. That's fine.
I am correct up to the point of the cell having awareness of its existence and of the need to join with other cells to create another form which will be stronger, more enduring, will survive longer, and will be able to regenerate itself to continue performing its function.
Okay.
Okay? So everything on our planet, including the planet itself, is really alive in that sense. It's part of this overall conscience. Now, certain forms, especially the ones that for one reason or another had to move from one place to another, they began to acquire a conscience of existence, which is different from a consciousness of existence. This distinction must be kept in mind. Okay, awareness of being is one thing. Conscience of existence is another. So, okay, if I think I exist, wasn't that what Descartes said?
Yes. Therefore I am.
All right. Please, complete.
Yes. What was that? If I think, therefore I am. Wasn't that how that went?
Yeah.
Okay.
Cogito ergo sumo. The fact is, this brought on the need to individualize the form. Okay, so a grain of sand wanted to differentiate itself from another grain of sand. It wanted to acquire an individuality. So this organism that was all of consciousness of being, all of awareness of being, decided that it needed to individualize itself. So it began to create a form. Another factor, consciousness didn't need the language, didn't need a form, didn't need food, because it was all-pervading. Once it started to want to create an individuality, it felt the need to create a body, an envelope in which it would nourish that individuality.
Okay.
Once it acquired this envelope, it saw the need that to sustain this envelope, it would have to create a complex mechanism inside that body. This is our organism, our heart, which pumps blood, our liver that processes the blood, and so forth and so forth. Okay?
Okay.
Now, the total consciousness of all these cells, each in their own function, creates an ego, because once it is enclosed in an envelope, it loses contact with the consciousness that is all-pervading. It starts to need a language, so it has to create a tongue. It has to nourish itself, so it has to attribute a palate to the tongue. Then it has to have a stomach to digest the food, and so forth and so forth. So the complexity created the human species. As this complexity was created, thanks to the interference of a highly advanced species from somewhere, I don't know where, I don't know if it's Nibiru, if it's Sirius or whatever, or Andromeda or whatever, but a constant visitor, seeing the plight of these new individuals isolating themselves from one another instead of joining each other, they who were advanced had the means of upgrading genetically this species and giving it several other attributes. So we went through a third stage. The first stage, we were a subtle consciousness, a formless being. The second stage, we had an envelope, and we developed a mechanism to nourish that envelope and to develop it, to stabilize it. The third one, we acquired a mind through genetic upgrading from a higher species. The fourth one, now the third one originated probably, according to my way of thinking, on a continent that doesn't exist anymore. That would be Mu. But from there, it spread in all its forms, in all its social stages, to the rest of the planet, to various places. That's another subject that we can talk about, because they reached China, they reached Europe, they reached the Far East, and they were found there by other visitors from later times. Then they also, when their continent submerged because of catastrophes, which I don't know how they can be or not attributed to these visits, but possibly. But there are geological explanations that could make sense. They also reached Atlantis, where one of their precursor migrations created an isolated civilization with a lot of intellectual development. There was a rise in social conscience in the Atlanteans.
Okay.
But Atlantis too suffered a catastrophe, and that is attributable to a visit from our friend, the dwarf star with its company, and spread from there to other places. Okay?
Okay.
And took this intelligence along with them to help develop the other societies that it met along its way. They were navigators. They sailed the high seas. They knew all the lands of the planet. They had elaborate systems of orientation, and they had been taught something else.
What was that?
That was how to know the stars and to understand what was above them.
Oddly enough,
I would say that before astrology, astronomy was the first lesson they learned.
That was my next question, as a matter of fact.
Astronomy was the mapping of the skies to show the path that the visitors would follow on their next visit. So this is why the subject of Nibiru is not a recent modern urban myth. It has extraterrestrial life, and Nibiru and everything else has been a part of human history for several millennia, even in our historical current, what I call the fifth stage of humanity, phase. We are possibly the most unfortunate of these stages, because we have surpassed everything that we had to go through to reach this stage, but we're unable to control ourselves from the worst tendencies, from the vulnerabilities. Okay?
Okay.
So we are in a fifth stage of human evolution. We are descendants of a mixture of Atlanteans, remnant of Movians, and other descendants from them all over the world. Then we too were helped along the way, no longer needing upgrading because we were reaching the knowledge of how to do that ourselves. There were medical procedures and surgery procedures in ancient Egypt that most of our modern doctors are unaware of. They don't even know that Egyptians operated the brain. Egyptians implanted dismemberment. If anybody lost a finger, they could put the finger back on and grow it back on. They messed with the heart. They didn't have the high technology that we have today. And unfortunately, this high technology is making our scientists more stupid than wise, because they are beginning to depend too much on that technology. I think you will remember, I think you are of my own age range, you will remember that we had what we called the family doctors not very long ago.
Yes, they used to come out to the house.
50, 60, half a century ago.
Yeah, they used to come out to the house.
Yeah. And if you called them on the phone and said, look, I'm having a stomachache, what should I take? What's the smell of that stomachache? So-and-so. Okay, take this and not that. They knew us from our early years all the way, and most of them survived us, in fact.
Right.
But today's doctors, they don't even look at the patient. They don't recognize the patient as a human being. So they are dumber than the old doctors, because technology is becoming what should I call it? The medicine of the day, the diagnostic of the well,
right. They take a look. They took a look at you and say, "Let's do this test, and this test."
Yeah, and they use laboratorial manuals to prescribe the medicine. Look, this medicine is good for this and this and this and this. They don't look to see the counterindications or the things that it is not meant for, but they will prescribe it to you. You will take it. You will buy it in the drugstore. Probably your pain will go away, and you will be happy as long as you last.
Right.
So we have come to a stage of development where we need urgently to shift our mental structure. We are definitely degrading our ability as human beings. Violence is rampaging. We are imprisoning ourselves. We are becoming complacent, and we live off TV and computers and communication. We don't know who is our neighbor in a 20-story building. I have known people who were born, raised, studied in the school on the ground floor, and never knew who their neighbors were.
Wow.
And this is the state of the world today. We have no representation, no correct political representation, not for any other reason, but that we simply don't believe in it. We are our own, we are the ones to blame for everything that we are suffering nowadays.
That's our own fault.
So Nibiru would simply make a new cleaning and give us a chance to renew our life, our species, our civilization, and bring it back to its senses. I would put it that way.
Yeah. Do you think that's something that's in our nature? Is that we get to a certain stage during these 3,600-year cycles, and then we're knocked back and we start all over, and we start out good, and we end up like crap, like we are now?
I would say so, yes, because if you can observe one thing, even in our modern history, the cycles are growing shorter and shorter.
Yes.
Nations, countries, policies, philosophies, they last less than they used to last before. Are they wrong? Are they debunked? Are they proven to be false? No, it's just the stage. when we get used to something and accommodate ourselves in that, then we begin our degeneration. And this is why survival is a serious problem to be dealt with. We have to look at it in a different way. It's not a question of surviving or dying or perishing or whatever. Do we want to survive? What for? What do we believe in? What are we going to bequeath to those who will survive with us? There are a lot of things that have to be discussed in this sense. It's not merely a question, will Nibiru destroy us? Will it collide with us? Will it kill us? How many of us will die? Who will die? We don't know. But we can prevent, we can boost our chances of survival depending on how we face the problem, how we look at it.
Yeah. You know, I have people that I know. You know, they know that I'm, what do you call, one of these survivalist guys. You know, we're well prepared around here. And, you know, we can survive the upcoming disasters, I believe, without too much problem. And people ask me, they say, Bill, why do you want to survive? What's the point? I'd rather just die.
Huh?
And I tell them, for the continuation of the species. Somebody has to be left here to rebuild what we're going to lose. Somebody has to be here to remember.
I would put it even harder. I would say somebody has to be left to rebuild what we are destroying.
Yeah. I never thought of it that way, but I try to answer them the best I can, and that's what I've come up with. I mean, in my own mind, that's why I want to survive, the continuation of the species. Somebody's got to be here to teach people, you know, this is what you got to do to survive. Now, we've got, we got depressing there for a minute, didn't we?
Yeah, we did.
Well, why does that always happen on my shows? And we get to a certain point, then all of a sudden everybody's dying. Every one of my shows, it seems to happen. We've got, unfortunately, we've got another 20 minutes left to kill everybody. You mentioned a few minutes ago that we're in the 5th stage, and I think that it would be an appropriate finishing subject to try and I'd like to get you to talk about what the previous 4 stages were. And we got 20 minutes left in the show here, so I think we can probably make a pretty good dent in what those other stages were, because I think that's something that people are very interested in.
According to at least 4 different schools of thought, all of them drawing from information out of the past, documented or not, subject to interpretation and subject to discussion. Mm-hmm. The first stage was the subtle or formless agglomeration of awareness of being. Okay, so several cells that had been through a definite experience with the other physical forms of earth, the elements, fire, and so on. They joined together, but they were always open to every other cell, because conscious was all-pervading. They were formless. There was no form, and you could you didn't have any elbows to what's that American saying? I'm forgetting my American period. You don't rub elbows with each other because you don't have any elbows. So what you rub is your conscience, your awareness of existence, of being. This stage was unsatisfying because there were various forms, and some of them were very complex, like the primitive animals. Well, I don't know if they were dinosaurs, but the primitive ones, I think, were the sea species, the bacteria, the viruses, and so on. They were the first forms. And they had individuality. They couldn't affect the subtle forms. In other words, a mosquito couldn't infect anybody with malaria or whatever, or even the flu, because there was no body to bite. But they created a body to create this individuality, to acquire this individuality. So the first real stage of a species we can call human is the one that acquired an envelope. And those groups of cells with a like awareness of being, they joined in these bodies. But soon they found that they had disconnected themselves from the overall pervading consciousness. Their acquired individuality was short-lived because they had no way of nourishing it and no way of communicating among themselves. So they started organizing a complex mechanism inside the body through which they could manifest the various needs to express themselves. Okay? So each cell had to take up a function, and the funny thing is that there was no fate, there was nobody to say, Boris, you're going to become a cell in the liver. Each cell found the place where it needed to be, a function that was necessary, so it fulfilled it. And cells are short-lived but reproduce themselves by subdivision, so they could ensure a longer life. And once they started to create this complicated mechanism inside the body, which was the third stage, okay, the first one was the subtle form, the second stage was the envelope, but with no attributes. The third one was the first one really coming close to what we think of as the human species. But it was the third stage of a living species, with an individual aim, objective, so to put it.
Okay.
By then, our visitors decided that this third stage was apt to be upgraded, to be helped, to enable it to survive better in an hospital environment, because Earth was not a hospitable place in that sense. It had large animals, it suffered enormous catastrophes, it was still in formation, because once it separated itself from the original large planet and became a revolving rock around the sun, by the time it rounded itself off again, by the time it cooled down a crust, by the time the internal heat created an atmosphere on the outside within the magnetic shield, and this became vapor and transformed itself into water, and the water began to recycle. Before the alchemy of the four elements created a habitable planet, made Earth a habitable planet, several billion years went by. Okay, I'm talking here. The collision must have happened sometime at 4.7 billion years ago.
Okay.
The first subtle form probably is said to have appeared about 2 billion years ago. So we exist. We are much older than we think.
Right.
We started our existence 2 billion years ago, but still in hospitable circumstances. And we developed together with the development of our planet, which became more and more hospitable, and we helped transform much of that. Because we were messengers, just like the bees, of pollination of plants, of migration. Our residues also fertilized Earth. Then we started selecting in the third stage, when we had a body and an organism that took in food and processed it. Then we started transforming our environment. With the upgrading, with the help we got from extraterrestrials, we began to create sedimented bases. Even the nomads, though not sedimented, they had a structure, they had unity. There were certain instincts that became behavioral patterns. So this third stage was really when we developed behavioral patterns and foundations on which to come to the fourth stage, when we would become a society. Until then, we were groups, clans, but we were not primitive, we were not cavemen, we were not hunters. We were all of those things. We experimented with everything, and those things that we were successful at, we adopted as a way of life. But it was only in the fourth stage, the one preceding ours, that we established patterns of society. We established ethics. We established morality and all those sorts of things. By the way, ancient mythology calls the first subtle, formless age the Golden Age, because there were no needs, no egos, no demands. Everybody was happy the way they were, etc. In terms. Life was simple, okay? You lived it out simply because you were together with everybody else. But it was short-lived, lasted little, and obviously once the envelope was created, you created ambitions, you grew needs. So you changed from a golden age into a silver age. You were happy now that you had created something. You were generating something. And that you had discovered that you had needs that had to be fulfilled, functions that had to be accomplished, and so on and so on. And this went on. In the fourth stage, we developed our intellect. That's when we started thinking of what we were doing. That's when we became conscious as human beings. But please don't confuse this with primitiveness.
Okay.
Because cellular consciousness is far deeper and more encompassing than our intellectual, selfish, individualistic consciousness. Okay?
Okay.
Overall consciousness is far more far-reaching than ours. Ours goes as far as we can accomplish something ourselves, by ourselves, in whatever environment or situation we find ourselves in. But that other consciousness could accomplish anything in the whole of the environment. So in the fourth stage, we created more limitations to ourselves. We created morality, ethics, social behavior, by which we became a larger expression of the cells that made us up, because each of the cells had to have a function, had to fulfill something. So now we, as an integral human being, had to also acquire functions and accomplish things to enable us in groups, in societies.
Right.
That is, in fact, when we probably acquired the sense of sexuality. In 20 minutes, I'm giving you only the highlights. I would have to go a long way to talk about the whole thing the way I see it nowadays.
You mean there's more?
Oh, there's much more. There's much more. There's much more. And I'm sure that there will be people who are listening to this who will have questions they would ask on the very points that I'm missing, let's say, in this description.
Okay.
So, by the time the fourth stage of humanity arose, the Atlanteans, the descendants, and the others with whom they established contact, please remember that Plato tells us that the Atlanteans sailed as far as Athens and destroyed the old Athens. They were warriors. They were already beginning to want to have more space and to have more influence, to have more power. Mm-hmm. So this brought about the new fifth stage. And during all this time, every 3,600 years, we were somehow helped by knowledge, information, and even certain, how could I say it, influences leading us into certain directions from our friends outside. Okay?
Okay.
At times they regretted what they provided us, so they tried to make us shift those things that were being destructive and so on. You see, there's a lot more to say. It's hard to explain, for example, how Movians can have built an enormous civilization in the north of China a long time before Mu submerged.
Right.
But what do we understand in terms of civilization? They had astronomy, and they developed astrological ideas and thoughts and concepts, and they bequeathed them to the other peoples with whom they had contact. But they didn't have the civilization that we today acknowledge as such. Our great problem, including our scientists, our academics, our intellectuals, is that we see everything from our perspective, our point of view, as we know it today. So we think that everybody who did not think, feel, and behave the same way we do is primitive, is a caveman, or is a lunatic.
Right.
Okay? And we cannot envision a peaceful human society because we are always competing with each other. We have to be better than the next one. We have to have more than the next one. We have to have the most modern widescreen TV or the latest computerized automobile or whatever, or the largest yacht, or the best fishing rod. Even fishing doesn't have any as much fun as it used to when we had to pick our own worms as bait. Now we can buy bait in a store. This sort of thing. We don't realize just how much we have divorced ourselves from our inner nature. We live artificial social standards which are not really want. This is why we are always in conflict. So it's very easy to manipulate us magnetically or otherwise into fundamentalist ideas, radical measures or attitudes, or even influence us through fear of death or catastrophe or whatever.
Okay.
One of the philosophies of modern politics is divide to conquer. Do not unite, you divide.
We see that here in the United States all the time.
Yeah, it's obvious in the whole world. We talk of equality, fraternity, unity, But in reality, we are all the time dividing people. We are classifying them. We are creating specialities which place people apart from the others. And in the common run of the day, everybody is becoming robotized and simply has to survive. Look, you have to survive, period.
Yes.
And that's it. Well, this is the fifth stage. So we are entering the end of a self-destructive cycle. Even if, this is my way of looking at it,
okay,
even if there were no Nibiru threat, and I don't see the Anunnaki as a threat, although I do see that the physical crossover of the planet and of the red dwarf star is a threat in our terms. But even without that, we are heading straight for self-destruction. We are killing the egg that lays our golden eggs.
Yeah.
And it's time for us to shake our minds and start thinking seriously. What the hell are we doing here? What am I doing here? Why do I want to survive? What will I do if I do survive?
Those are all poignant and very excellent questions. And unfortunately, we have run out of time.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yes.
And so, we didn't touch even one page of the script.
Folks, we have an 11-page document that Boris and I have been working on for the past month, and we have barely got onto the first part of the third page here. So I think what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to continue this conversation. And what I'm wondering is if you're up for doing this again next week.
Next year?
Yes.
What would that be, on Tuesday? Just a minute. I have something on Saturday with the Africans. Tuesday, okay.
On the 29th.
Yeah.
So, folks, if you enjoyed this conversation, we're going to take up right from where we left off next week. At the end of the fifth stage where we are now, and we're going to see what comes next and what type of trouble we can get ourselves into next week. How many people we can kill off by the middle of the show like we did this week.
How many billion people?
Yeah, how many billion peoples we can knock off next week. So, anyways, this show is going to be up on YouTube probably by tomorrow morning. And what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and sign off for the evening. And, Boris, don't go anywhere because I'm going to turn off the broadcasting microphone, and then we can talk for a couple of minutes after the show's over. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are officially going off the air right now. Thank you for stopping by, and make sure that you listen to us all week long because we use video cameras during the week. Have a good evening, everybody, and thank you for showing up. Bye.